You know, history is very rarely black and white. But for Empress Theodora, it's like a tale of two completely different women. For, 1,500 years, she's been painted as either a saint or a sinner, a champion of the poor, or a master of, well, depravity. So, which is it? Let's try and unravel the story of one of history's most fascinating and controversial rulers.
Okay, so look at this. On one side, you've got the official portrait, this 6th century mosaic showing Theodora as solemn, regal, almost divine. But on the other side, a 19th century painting that captures a totally different vibe, a powerful, sensual empress. One is literally a saint, venerated by the church. The other, a seductress straight out of a scandalous tell-all. How can both of these possibly be the same person?
Answering that question, well, it means we have to become detectives. We've got to sift through all these layers of history, cut through what is clearly propaganda, and try to separate fact from centuries of scandal just to understand the woman who ruled the Byzantine Empire right at the peak of its power.
Theodora's journey from the stage to the throne is one of history's most incredible stories of climbing the social ladder. Seriously, it wasn't just unlikely. By the rules of her time, it should have been impossible. She came from the absolute bottom of society, a world of performers and outcasts, which was a universe away from the marbled halls of the imperial palace.
So get this, her father was a bear keeper for the green chariot racing team at the Hippodrome, and you can just think of that as the ancient world's rowdiest, craziest sports arena. Her mother was an actress, a job that was seen as deeply, deeply disreputable back then. When her dad died, the family was just left with nothing. The Greens totally turned their backs on them, but their bitter rivals, the Blues, they stepped in to help. It was a brutal, early lesson in how power and loyalty really worked, a lesson she would absolutely never forget.
The most shocking account of her early years comes from the historian Procopius. In his infamous Secret History, he describes Theodora not just as an actress, but as a prostitute who performed these outrageous shows on stage. He paints this picture of a woman utterly without shame, using her body and her wit to survive in a pretty brutal world.
It's a truly shocking story. But, with Procopius, there's always a catch, and we are definitely going to get back to that later. For now, just know that this scandalous tale is only one piece of the puzzle. The verified facts of her rise to power are in some ways even more incredible.
Whatever her past was, Theodora's rise was just meteoric. Back in Constantinople, she completely captivated the heir to the throne, Justinian. He was obsessed, but there were two huge problems. First, the law strictly forbade a man of his standing, a senator, from marrying an actress. And second, the reigning empress, Euphemia, she despised Theodora. But Justinian was patient. As soon as Euphemia died, he didn't just bend the law, he had it completely rewritten. And by 527, he was emperor, and Theodora, the bearkeeper's daughter, was crowned empress right there at his side.
But, becoming empress is one thing. Staying empress, that's another. Just 5 years into their reign, the entire empire would be on the verge of collapse, and Theodora would prove to everyone that she possessed a will of pure, unbending iron.
So in January 532, the city just exploded. The green and blue factions, who were usually at each other's throats, they united in this massive uprising we now call the Nika riots. They set fire to the city, including the original Hagia Sophia, and they even crowned a new emperor. The situation was completely out of control.
Justinian and his top advisors were terrified. They saw only one option: escape. The imperial ships were waiting loaded up with treasure. The council agreed. They were just going to abandon the throne and save their own lives.
And then Theodora spoke. In a room full of powerful men who were ready to run, she stood her ground. She told them that for her, flight was not an option. She famously declared that she would rather die an empress shrouded in the royal purple than live as a fugitive. Her words, they changed everything.
Spurred on by her speech, Justinian's entire strategy shifted. He ordered his generals to trap the rebels in the Hippodrome, and the result was a complete massacre. An estimated 30,000 people were killed. It was a brutal, bloody end to the uprising, but it saved their throne. And you can bet that from that day forward, no one in Constantinople ever doubted Theodora's power or her ruthlessness.
But her reign wasn't just about ruthless survival. Theodora wielded her newfound power in ways nobody expected, becoming this fierce advocate for the vulnerable and a clandestine protector of her faith.
Drawing on her own past, she passed these sweeping reforms to help the most vulnerable women in the empire. She shut down brothels, she paid the debts of sex workers to free them from their pimps, and she established a convent called metanoia, which means repentance, where these women could find refuge and actually start new lives.
Now, Theodora was also deeply religious, but her beliefs put her directly at odds with her own husband. She was a Miaphysite, a follower of a Christian doctrine that the official state church, the one supported by Justinian, considered to be heresy. And this created an absolutely extraordinary situation. While Justinian was publicly working to enforce religious unity under the official creed, Theodora was secretly working against him. She used the imperial palace itself as a sanctuary, hiding Miaphysite bishops and monks from her husband's own officials. It was an incredibly dangerous political game, balancing her loyalty to her husband with her loyalty to her faith.
And for her unwavering protection of this persecuted community, the Oriental Orthodox churches recognize Empress Theodora as a saint to this day. A saint! Which brings us right back to our central problem, and the final piece of this whole puzzle.
So how can one woman be both a depraved sinner and a venerated saint? Well, the answer lies not just with her, but with the man who wrote her story. Remember Procopius?
Yeah, it all comes down to him. The same man wrote 3 wildly different versions of Theodora. In his public wars of Justinian, she's the courageous heroine who saved the empire. But then, in his secret history, which was only published after he died, she's a demonic, power-hungry monster. And then, in yet another book, he praises her as a pious and beautiful ruler. How is that possible? Well, it seems Procopius wrote whatever his audience, or his own private grudge, demanded at the time.
So, who was the real Theodora? A sinner? A saint? A brilliant politician? The truth is, we may never know. Her true face is lost to us, filtered through the biases of one incredibly unreliable narrator. Maybe her real legacy isn't about who she was, but about what her story reveals. That history isn't just what happened. It's about who gets to tell the story. And that leaves us with one final, kind of unsettling question. How many other histories have been shaped not by the truth, but by the secret grudges of the people who wrote them?